long before continents took their modern shape, and long before humans learned to sail the open oceans. The world was ruled by a civilization that rose not from land, nor sky, nor forest, but from the restless, ever-changing sea. They called themselves the Tideforged, a people who believed the ocean was a living consciousness, ancient and wise, and that they themselves had been shaped from its breath. Legends say they were born on a night when the moon was swallowed by a storm so large it encircled the world. In the heart of that storm, lightning struck the sea, splitting the waves apart, and from the glowing steam emerged a small group of infants wrapped in seaweed and glowing with faint blue veins. Fishermen found them on the shore after the storm passed, crying softly in voices that echoed like waves in a cave. No one knew where they came from, but everyone understood they were not ordinary children. As the infants grew into adulthood, the sea itself seemed to bend around them. Fish gathered near their villages in unnatural numbers. Storms broke early when they raised their hands toward the sky. They could dive deeper than any human, surfacing without gasping for breath. By the time they reached maturity, they had left the fishermen behind and built the first Tideforged city on an enormous coral shelf. Far from the mainland, they shaped their homes from hardened sea glass, coral bone, and leviathan shells, creating architecture that twisted like frozen currents and shimmered like underwater light. Their city, called Nerulon, became a beacon of pale blue glow on the ocean horizon. The Tideforged developed an extraordinary relationship with the sea. They learned to harness the tides not just for travel, but for crafting. They forged metal in underwater vents where molten minerals mixed with cold brine, creating tide steel, a material flexible as cloth yet stronger than iron. They used strands of bioluminescent algae to create glowing murals across the walls of Nerulon, painting stories that shimmered and moved as though alive. They trained giant manta-steeds to carry them across the open ocean, gliding above waves like shadows of clouds. Their society was built around listening not to rulers, but to the sea's pulse. At the heart of Nerulon stood the tidal throne, not a seat, but a living whirlpool that glowed with ancient energy. The leader of the Tideforged, known as the High Current, stood within this whirlpool during ceremonies, allowing water to wrap around them, lift them, and whisper guidance. The sea had no written language, but those chosen by the tidal throne claimed they could interpret its intentions through shifts in temperature, pressure, and sound. Under this guidance, the Tideforged expanded across the ocean, building floating sanctuaries tethered to migrating whales and carving spiral dwellings into cliffs. Rising from the deep, they prospered without war, for the ocean fed them, protected them, and warned them of danger long before it arrived. But no empire, no matter how harmonious, is immune to change. The first sign of approaching disaster came in the form of silence. The sea is never truly quiet. Waves breathe, currents hum, creatures murmur. But one night, an unnatural stillness fell across Nerulon. Fish vanished, wind stopped, even the glow of algae dimmed. The Tideforged elders gathered at the tidal throne, stepping into the glowing whirlpool for answers. When they listened, they heard only one message repeated again and again, as if the sea itself trembled with fear. Something wakes in the deep. Within days, the ocean began behaving strangely. Waves rose without wind, warm currents collided with icy streams, whales fled and panicked. Migrations, storms brewed faster than ever recorded. Divers reported seeing gigantic shadows far below, larger than anything known to the Tideforged, shapes that moved slowly, purposefully, with hunger. Ancient murals spoken of only in whispers told of beings from before the creation of land, creatures that once ruled the planet when everything was ocean. They were called the Abyssal Lords, and according to legend, they had only one desire: to reclaim the world they lost. One night, the sea began to glow with an eerie red light. The Tideforged rushed to the cliffs and saw a massive creature rising from the depths. Its body covered in armor like scales, its eyes glowing like molten stone. It was followed by two more, each larger than the great islands of the south. The Abyssal Lords had awakened, and they were heading toward Nerulon. The High Current called upon every warrior, every crafter, every tidesinger. Tide steel weapons were forged at lightning speed, infused with shimmering currents. Ocean spirit allies, creatures formed of water and light, were summoned from sacred reefs. The manta-steeds were armored, their wings lined with razor-sharp coral. For the first time in their long peace, the Tideforged prepared for war. The battle that followed lasted a full week. The Abyssal Lords crashed against the city with the force of mountains falling. Their roars split the air. Their tentacles crushed sea glass towers into powder. Tideforged warriors fought with impossible bravery, darting between colossal limbs, cutting through scaled armor, summoning whirlpools and tidal waves. The ocean itself rose in rebellion, swirling into spirals of silver and blue under the guidance of the Tide Singers. But the Abyssal Lords were ancient, eternal, relentless, for every wound inflicted. They regenerated, for every retreat, they returned stronger. On the sixth night, Nerulon's outer walls collapsed entirely, and the glowing buildings sank slowly into the churning waves. The tide steel forges extinguished, the manta-steeds scattered, the ocean became red with fury and sorrow. Knowing that the Abyssal Lords could not be defeated by force, the High Current made a final, desperate decision. They returned to the tidal throne, stepping into the dying whirlpool as the Lords advanced. They allowed the sea to fill their lungs, bones, and blood. They surrendered their very life to merge completely with the ocean's ancient spirit. The sea responded with a pulse that shook the world. A wall of water rose higher than mountains, brighter than moonlight, and crashed down upon the Abyssal Lords with the strength of a collapsing star. When the water settled, the Abyssal Lords were gone, sealed back into the abyss from which they had risen. But so was Nerulon. The city was destroyed, swallowed whole. The Tideforged people were scattered across distant shores, their culture broken into fragments. Some survived and formed small coastal tribes. Some wandered the seas for generations on carved driftwood rafts. Some disappeared entirely, leaving only stories behind. Today, sailors whisper that the ocean still remembers the Tideforged. They claim that sometimes, during the darkest storms, glowing figures rise from the waves, warriors made of water and memory, riding manta shadows across the surf. Some say the tidal throne still exists far below, pulsing weakly on the ocean floor, waiting for someone brave enough or desperate enough to listen again. Empires fall, cities sink, but legends drift forever, and the sea does not forget.